So I think in life it's important to keep on developing and trying new things. And one of the things that I've been doing, I suppose, over the last 3 or 4 months is taking part in interviews. So recently I did last Sunday it was, I did the Amish Inquisition, and that was really enjoyed it. Some very solid guys from, I think, around the Burnley sort of region, I think they are. I'll put a link to it in this description. You can go and check that out. I also did quite a long like podcast with the international octors for Divot ethics. I'll put a link in there. So I also did that as well. Anyway, I've been thinking about this for a while, but I'm not all that techie. So I've only just like really sussed it out. Is actually doing interviews myself. So and I've used Zoom. So the first one that I've done is with this guy called Nick Hayes. He's got a YouTube channel called Hayes Reviews. Again, I'll give a link to Nick's website. Sorry, not website. Nick's YouTube channel in this YouTube video description. So Nick's also a coincidence. He's also from Burnley in northeast Lancs, and we had a great chat about the origins of the Coviet Union, issues pertaining to like morality, and yeah, it was a very interesting chat. So without further ado, please enjoy the interview with Nick Hayes. So God bless. Okay, so this is Nick Hay from Hayes Reviews, and this is the first time I've done an interview on my YouTube channel. So, Nick, could you sort of tell us about your background? What
Yeah,
do you do
absolutely.
for a living?
So my background, I'll go a little bit further back. I was a English literature graduate at university, and I studied English literature, and then I had a bit of a crisis. What the hell am I doing here studying poetry? What good is that for anybody? And so I started working for a charity, and then I was a support worker for people with learning disabilities. That morphed into English teaching, and I spied an opportunity to go and live in Southeast Asia, and just teach there for a year in South Korea. And I loved that, and I ended up staying there for 6 years. Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, traveling around, teaching and working. That was a wonderful time. I came back to the UK. My wife came over here to study. Well, my girlfriend at the time, she came here to study. We got married, and we stayed here in the UK since then. We got married in 2019. And since then, I've been doing a mixture of all these things, a bit of English teaching, a bit of charity support work. And then most recently, my career has morphed into business management consulting and risk manager. And then on the side, I'm running my YouTube channel, as you mentioned,
Yeah,
which is Hayes Reviews.
yeah. So what's the idea behind Hayes Reviews?
So the idea, this is a really good story, and I enjoy telling it. So in 2020, there was a big event that happened all around the world. Something happened suddenly, and it was extremely confusing to me. And because the things I was getting told through my television and through the usual methods of mainstream communication, none of it made any sense. There was supposedly a health emergency going on, and yet they were telling us nothing about how to be healthy, no advice on how to stay resilient in the face of disease, sickness, or illness, nothing. And I'd learned quite a bit of that through my own studies, listening to podcasts and trying to deal with anxiety and depression, which had come up for me a few times in the past. So I knew a little bit about meditation and cold showers and diet and exercise, and they weren't giving us any of this. So I thought, hang
Yeah,
on a sec, alarm bells are ringing, spider senses
yeah,
tingling. And I just started going on a bit of a learning spree, trying to find who out there was giving a better insight into what was going on. And then I discovered quite a few content creators, James Corbett, The Last American Vagabond, these kind of characters.
yeah,
And what I noticed was they were putting out these shows, and underneath they were saying, here's the resources, here's the documents, here's what
yeah,
the UN is saying, here's what the WHO is saying, here's what the UK government is saying, here's what the NHS is saying. This is what I think. What do you think? Read them and make your own mind up. And I was
yeah.
like, wow, you know,
People like James Corbett, they compared to say the BBC or the Guardian, they go into things in a lot more detail. They make reference to their sources. So yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. And then what happened pretty soon after that was I watched Corbett and Last American Vagabond get nuked. Their channels got removed from YouTube. Just boom, gone. And all that work, all those hours, all that content, documentaries, all the resources and the references. Now, luckily, they had their own websites going, so you could still find their work, but it was gone from YouTube.
yeah,
And I was like, that's curious because these guys, they're putting out the best information as far as I can tell, and YouTube's just got rid of them. So, so
yeah. It
then
makes you start thinking, doesn't it? Really, what's going on?
exactly.
Yeah.
And so at some point, I saw James Orbit was making an appearance on a podcast called Grand Theft World Podcast, and
Okay.
that's hosted by this gentleman called Richard Grove. And in their conversation, they were speaking about books. And they were talking about how in this era of censorship and deplatforming and shadow banning, all these kind of tactics that are going on, how if you have the books, then at least you have something physical, something tangible that you can refer to and you can look at and you can show people.
Yeah.
And Richard on his channel, he had this book cam and he would regularly do these long form podcasts and he would pull a book off the shelf and switch the book cam on and he would show you the page and it's highlighted and he would give you the quote. And
Yeah.
I was so impressed with this guy's knowledge. And that coupled with this recognition that there was a lot of censorship and a lot of clamping down on alternative media, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to stock up on some of these books because at that point, this is 2020, 2021. I didn't know where it was going to end. I didn't know how far
Yeah.
they were going to take this. I didn't know if I didn't
Yeah.
know they were going to roll it back, in other words. So I was like, just stocking up on all these books. I was scouring all the secondhand bookshops. I was in
Yeah.
Bristol at the time. And that's got a big university there. And all the Oxfams around that city are just packed full with
Yeah.
ex-library books. And I'm going in, I'm picking these books up for £2, £3, £4. And I'm
Yeah.
like laughing, thinking that I'm like a gold miner. I'm pulling up all these
Yeah.
nuggets
Yeah.
for bargain. And then my library just, well, became what it is over there. You can see it's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
400 or 500 books at this point. And so
So,
I just, yeah.
so Nick, where would it be fair to say, were you aware of other things that didn't quite add up prior to the event that we're not allowed to talk about in spring 2020?
Not very much. I mentioned the health side of things. So I was
Yeah.
listening to Joe Rogan, and he's a bit of a health freak.
Yeah.
And so I was aware of certain diets and how the food
Yeah.
pyramid was a complete lie
Yeah.
and the dangers of refined carbohydrates and seed
Yeah.
oils and all this kind
Yeah.
of stuff. So I knew that was all off kilter, but I could kind of explain that away with pharmaceutical industries making money from sick people and nothing more
Yeah,
sinister than that.
and I guess also the training of GPs and well, all doctors, they're just not taught anything about nutrition, and they just I suppose it's the problem is that the type of person that becomes a doctor is what I call a good repeater station. They're academically good. They've got a good memory. They can repeat things accurately and quickly in an exam. So that's the type of person that gets into those positions rather than the critical thinker.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
And the other thing about our doctors is, and junior doctors in particular, the stress and the pressure that they're put under.
yeah,
And it is so intense. Like, why would you want to put the people who are supposedly the caretakers of our health and our well-being? Why
yeah.
would you want to stress them under these intense conditions to breaking
Mm.
point? It's famous, isn't it? Medical school for being so
Well,
intense that,
yeah, and I think also as well, even once they've finished medical school, it seems to me that every ailment of modern man, there's a health protocol that goes with it, and there's
yeah.
drugs to be prescribed for whatever, whether it's high blood pressure or this pathway. So it doesn't really seem to me that GPs these days have any sense of empowerment. They're just order followers, aren't they, or
Mm.
protocol followers, and they get in
Yeah.
trouble if they don't follow the protocol.
Yeah, and we saw that over the last few years, people getting
Yeah,
losing their medical licenses in various countries, and yeah, they
yeah,
basically get a list of symptoms, a list of pharmaceuticals, and they just match them up.
yeah,
Like those kind of primary school exercises you used to do, where you'd draw a line between the
yeah,
opposites or
exactly like that.
something.
Exactly like that. And I think you're right as well to mention diet because I think we can talk a little bit about that. Unlike the thing that happened in 2020 and the thing that came along in 2021 as the miracle cure. Those
Hmm.
are completely off limits. But I think the dietary advice. Um,
Well, you know, there's this phrase, isn't there, sustainable development? There's too
Yeah,
many people on the planet and all of that. I think the dietary advices may well have done more in terms of let's call it Depop than some of these interventions that came along in 2021.
right. Yeah,
You
and
know,
one of the
in
ways
terms
I
of
often
things,
look at it is, yeah, sorry, I was going to say is that they want people kind of sick and fat and docile and compliant. And if you go back to, the Egyptian times, the pharaohs, they're eating meats, they're eating fish,
yeah,
cream, and what do they give to the slaves? Well, they give them like wheat and
yeah,
carbs, basically. And so
yeah,
I kind of look at it as like there's slave food, and then
yeah,
there's, the food that the royalty and the so-called upper crust elite, even though that word is
yeah.
definitely not
Well,
what they
you
are,
know,
but that's what they get. And
yeah, you can call it the Davos diet, can't you? You know, you can you see the
that's a good one, yeah.
menus when the World Economic Forum meet, and it's all very very high quality meat and fish, isn't it? Really, and
Yeah.
there's no cheapo processed carbs on their menus or bugs for that matter. But
They're not eating a Greg's steak bake, for example.
no, not for them, no. But yeah, so basically, we've talked before out of this interview, and so you weren't. How did you feel with the wars in Iraq and Dr. David Kelly and
Mhm.
all of that? Was that did that sort of pass you by, or or what?
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't interested. From a very young age, I switched off to politics. I wasn't interested. I
Yeah,
was into computer games, and then I got into music in a big way, and I was in bands, and then girls came along, and it was then just a mix of those three, right
yeah.
up until we had some riots, and I forget what year it was. But there was riots here in London and Manchester as well,
Was
and
that the poll
something
tax? Was that the
it
poll
could have
tax
been.
riots?
I think it might have been a
Yeah.
bit. I can't remember. It might have been a bit later. But from that, I got interested in. I wrote a whole blog about. I started reading George Monbiot, the
Oh
Guardian
yeah.
columnist,
Yeah, I know him.
uh,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, this guy speaks so much sense. He's opening my mind to
Yeah.
all these kind of things. I'm going to be a vegan, right?" But that was kind of my entrance into caring about these bigger issues such as politics and more worldwide events. And then I moved to Asia, and so then I was kind of seeing what the people in the countries I was living in, how they
Yeah.
thought. I was in South Korea when the North Korean dictator died. And so
Yeah.
that was a very interesting place to be at the time because then people were
Yeah.
kind of having these conversations about the divide. And so it's been a very gradual unfolding. Um, Even though I've lived through a lot, the
Yeah.
11th of September 2001 event. I don't know how best in code word to refer to that, the Big Nine event,
Well,
Jay
yeah,
Dyer
Big
calls it.
Nine,
But
yeah.
so
But
I
you know,
lived through a lot of these things, and now that I'm learning more and being open to these kind of books and that
yeah.
have been written on all these topics, I'm kind of having to revise my understanding and revisit these things.
So I guess what happened then for you was that March 2020, it was almost like the curtain was pulled back, you know, Wizard of Oz style, and that
Yes.
basically that was like a key to a door, basically, that made you start thinking about all sorts of things that you'd maybe taken for granted.
Well, and one of the big parts of that, which was very unexpected, was to come to revisit faith and Christianity in particular. I was
Yeah,
raised Roman Catholic, and I drifted away. I never cared about it. Church was always boring. The hymns, and I was like into jazz,
yeah,
and I had a prog rock band. I was playing like a five
yeah.
string fretless bass, and going, and the hymns and the music were just so drab and boring, and
Yeah,
it was like cornflakes. Just
yeah.
the this really.
I
So I
don't
got
I don't know if you've heard this one, but it's something that I invented. I think what's happened is that people have been fed Brussels sprouts for years and years and years and told that they're eating strawberries. And when you
yeah,
ask somebody, do you like strawberries? They associate it obviously with Brussels sprouts and they say, oh, I don't
yeah.
like strawberries.
Oh no, I
Those are
hate
those
those things.
green sour things. But
Yeah,
I
yeah. And
think
so
go on, sorry, Nick.
just this whipping back of the curtain, it it caused me to go, right, okay, I don't know anything. I can't really assume anything that I think I know is true at this point.
Yeah,
So now I have to be open-minded
yeah.
about questioning all sorts of different things. And that, you know, through going through James Corbett, Richard Grove, I learned about Jay Dyer. He's an Orthodox Christian, and he was
Yeah,
talking about the transcendental argument for God. And that
yeah,
one was like, oh, okay, that's an incredibly powerful argument. And basically, for anyone who doesn't know about it, is the idea that everything we have around, like right now, I'm surrounded by cameras and screens and things. All of this came from the mind. It had
yeah,
to be an idea first,
yeah,
and then we go and put the effort in and the work to create it. And the idea
yeah,
is that that means, you know, in the same way, everything around us in reality all began in a mind, which
yeah,
kind of we can call God. And
yeah.
that was a big paradigm shift to me, and then changed everything. So the whipping back of the curtain, while it was a traumatic and stressful and crazy event that we're still all living through, even though
Yeah.
a lot of people don't like to talk about it, I still feel very grateful and glad that it like precipitated this revelation of information and a
So,
more accurate understanding of reality for me.
sorry, Nick, just to like clarify then. So before, I know you went to church, but in your heart of hearts, were you more like the earth was created by a big bang and or or did you believe in God prior to, Jay Dyer? Incidentally, Jay Dyer is absolutely brilliant. If you've not, to the audience in general, if you're not watching Jay Dyer, you're really missing out. But so
Yeah,
what do you
his
reckon
impressions
then?
as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
going
for
back
me,
to yeah,
kind of agnostic. I think I was just, well, if you say God's real, I'll go along with it. Because I was a very good school boy. I did what I was
yeah,
told. I followed the rules. You know, I ticked the boxes. I regurgitated the information, and I passed the exams. And I didn't interrogate any of the stuff I was being told or why school was the way it was or any of that. And it was the
yeah,
same with religion and God. And then I was exposed to Buddhist ways of thinking. And when I was traveling, I was listening a lot to Alan Watts, the kind
yeah,
of Eastern he was a British minister, wasn't he? But then he became this
yeah.
sort of Eastern spirituality guru, and I was listening to his stuff, and so it's just been a roundabout way. I've just been learning and learning and being agnostic
He's
to it all.
another in just to the wider audience. He's another guy. He's dead now, isn't he, Alan Watt?
Hmm.
But his
Well, there's Alan
material,
Watt and there's
yeah.
Alan Watts with an S, and they're two very
Aha.
different guys, and the names, obviously, for obvious reasons, get mixed up a lot.
Okay,
But
I might be
the
getting
one I'm
mixed up
talking
then.
about is with the S. He
Yeah,
was a Anglican priest, and he went over
yeah,
and became a celebrity on the scene in Eastern, sorry, West Coast America.
yeah,
And he was kind of advocating taking acid and giving all these lectures, and people think maybe he was an intelligence psyop and just
yeah.
used to kind of spread and
Uh-huh.
destabilize this kind of the Christianity.
But going back to, you said I didn't know this before. I didn't know you were into your music. But do you remember there was a song by, and I started to think about this a couple of days ago. There was a song by a Manchester band called the Manic Street Preachers.
Yeah, I
If
know
you
them.
if you tolerate this, then your children will be next.
Yeah,
And I remember, the video was very, very striking for that. It's like an anti-war song. And I think for myself, looking back, I knew things were wrong with, Gulf War One, let alone Gulf War Two and the dodgy dossier.
hmm,
And I talked to people about it verbally, but I just wonder whether I could have done more at that time to
hmm.
basically express the fact that I wasn't consenting to it. I didn't. It's difficult. I didn't go on that. There was a 2 million man march in London,
Yeah,
and I think I was away at my dad's house when it took place, or I might even have been playing cricket, which is even worse. But I bitterly regret that. But I
yeah,
did used to talk to students about it, and it's almost like that song came true.
yeah,
A lot of us
yeah,
didn't really care about Iraqi children having their, well, being killed and having living under an authoritarian puppet government that we were installing.
yeah.
And it's what happened in March 2020 is like, well, yeah, it did come home to roost for our children.
Mm, definitely. Yeah. And I think it's incredible how I think you've talked about it on your channel as well, how music and musicians and creative people, they'll tap into a kind of another source of knowledge and information. And I've
Yeah,
written songs and I have a few up on a SoundCloud. And when I couldn't sit down and write a song for you with like intentionally. But every now and again, occasionally, when the moon is full and the time is right, and and I've had just the right amount of sleep, a song just
Yeah,
appears. It literally just
yeah,
comes through me, and I have a song, and the lyrics are there, and the tune's there, and I'm
yeah.
like, whoa! And I can't even feel like I claim credit for it,
It's a spark.
And
It's a divine spark.
yeah, I think so. It's that
Yeah,
creativity. It's that made in
yeah,
the image of the creator,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
that
hundred
aspect that we
percent.
have. And I think musicians do that. And so there's the argument that I think music is undoubtedly a tool to sort of shape people's worldview and
Yeah,
influence people. There is a culture creation aspect to it, but there is also a pure aspect of tapping into knowledge that is greater and further and beyond just the left-brained analytical
yeah. No,
fact-based knowledge.
completely agree. So, Nick, we've got about 12 minutes left. So, um, the two things we were going to talk about, or I was going to ask you is, in your opinion, what do you
Mhm.
think went wrong to get us into a situation that we got ourselves in March 2020, when way too many people went along with things that they should never have gone along with? What's your take on that?
In 10 minutes. Yeah.
Sorry about
But
that.
certainly, no, 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 that's all good. I like a challenge. I think, and I've done a lot of listening to a variety of people speaking on this, and I think and like as we mentioned, talking about the transcendental argument for God, I think it comes back to mind. It comes back to how we believe and perceive and what our worldview is. And I think a lot of people are very confused. They don't have a coherent worldview. They haven't thought about what is the worldview. If they believe in the Big Bang, it is completely bonkers and irrational thing to believe in.
Or is it even bigger than that? Is it they've never really given it much thought to think about the big question of like, why are they here?
Yeah.
What's the point of life? Would that be a
Yeah.
fair summary?
Yeah. And the problem is if you don't ask those questions and seek the answers for yourself, you just absorb somebody else's.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
nowadays, that all comes through the TV. And so people
Yeah,
have a worldview which they've just kind of absorbed through the television. And the point of TV and movies and things like that is not to enjoy a story. The story is like the surface level thing. What you actually are getting is you're getting cues and signals on how to behave and what things to say and how to interact. And you think that, and you absorb this worldview, and it goes deeper into maybe your subconscious, and you think the world is a certain way. And I think a lot of people, they aren't aware of their worldview, and that is the worldview sort of dictates how they act in the world, and they don't
okay.
know
So
that they've downloaded that from somewhere else.
no, that I agree with that. Could you? I know it's another difficult question, Nick, but could you characterize that worldview? What sort
Mhm.
of things are people encouraged to think about about what life is about, what life is for?
I think, in a word, solipsism, which is the idea that the only thing that is true and real is me. Everything else is an illusion or just one aspect of the metaverse or a cosmic accident with no meaning or purpose. And the only thing I can be certain about is me. Therefore, I'll do what's best for me and
Yeah,
do whatever I want in the moment, satisfy my own passions, make
yeah.
myself comfortable at the expense of, well, the rest of it's I can't even prove it's real anyway. So who cares?
So it's a bit of nihilism
Yeah.
combined with hedonism.
Yes, definitely. And it's just what can I get out of this situation?
Yeah,
And that is the best way I can like explain it in a nutshell, for sure. It's
yeah,
not. And you talk about serving people, and that's one thing I totally agree with you on. Is the most rewarding jobs I've had are the working with people who have learning difficulties, or working with my
yeah,
students and
yeah,
helping them overcome or get better at something or move forward on something, or giving them
yeah.
information or that next piece of the puzzle they need, or whatever. Encourage any of that, and that's very different to the world I'm in now, which is corporate, where it's very removed from that, like person to person serving other people. You're kind of serving this entity that's a bit ambiguous and doesn't really exist, but everyone talks about it like it does because it's got a logo.
So this, so there is this sort of thing about ego and status and hedonism, isn't there? There's
Mhm.
like a triangle there. Somebody will accuse me of being Illuminati then, but like hedonism,
Yeah,
status symbols, ego, they're kind of, I think they're sort of linked, aren't they? Like people
definitely.
people think that their lives are going to be better if they can replace their leasehold BMW, every 2.5 years rather than every
Mm.
4 years, or their life's going to be transformed with a new kitchen units or something. And have
Yeah, just that next thing, that next
yeah,
shiny object that I can get my hands on, the new phone, the new laptop, the new
or
shiny pair of
an
trainers.
Instagrammable holiday or something. You
Yeah,
know, you
yeah,
can put the
exactly.
pictures up on the. But
Yeah. And in
so
many
what?
ways, I think people have kind of outsourced their responsibility. So that's another problem. It's like, I don't like, I see in my generation now, there's not as many of us having children and they're
Yeah,
leaving it later in life
yeah,
because there's a thing, I don't know if you've heard about dinks.
yeah.
Have
I
you heard
have.
about dinks?
Yeah, go on.
Double
Just
income,
it's yeah,
no, double income, no kids.
yeah.
And they're proud and they're hopping down the street. The best thing about this is I get to eat whatever I want and I can watch
Oh.
sports all day. And
So
it's
what's
like, dude,
that,
this is
Nick?
so sad
What's
because they've
what's
outsourced responsibility to the
yeah,
state, to the government, to the schools. They don't want it to the police, to whoever. They've just said, I don't want to be responsible for the future of my like community and family and people. I don't want any of that. I just want to watch Netflix and eat some, Doritos and have a takeaway, and the government can take care of all that stuff.
well, I don't know what you think, but that seems to me like a recipe for popping pills for depression in your mid 40s when
Yeah.
you realize that you've stripped your life of all meaning beyond, like, I don't know, conspicuous shallow consumption.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is that, for some people, it can be very hard to find someone to settle down with and start a family the later you leave it.
Yeah,
And I was I was kind of a serial monogamist. I went from girlfriend to girlfriend, plenty of broken hearts along the way, but I always had this intuition that I needed to pair up,
yeah,
and settle down, and it was important to me, and I didn't really know why until I got mature and really understood it and thought about it a little more. But nowadays, it's like the relationships are just as throwaway as the meals and the toys and the things that people
yeah.
buy and the TV that they watch. It's all consume it once and throw it away. So there's no like investment in the longevity and the long rewards that you get from really delaying gratification now so you can benefit into the future. It's very immediate
Sure.
and
I'll,
and
I'll throw this one in as I want to use the word excuse
Mhm.
or a way of explaining some people's behaviour. I think in England in particular, house prices are so high relative to average incomes. I think for many young people, they feel that they can't afford to have kids. Particularly
Yeah.
the people, the higher IQ end of society, the ones that maybe did well at school, went to university and professional jobs. Those sorts of people that what I saw when I was working at the school towards the end was that there was a lot of women in their late 20s, early 30s who were childless.
Mm.
And I think that some of them would have liked to have had kids, and the biological clock was ticking. And a major obstacle was just sky high house prices in
Yeah.
Surrey relative to the wages of a teacher.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It has to be by design. This is one thing that I've learned over the last 4 years
Yeah,
is the system is working perfectly. Like
yeah,
because it was designed for it to be the way it is, for to have the outcome that it's having. So a lot of people are like, oh, it's broken and they're just incompetent. It's like, no, no, no. It was designed and planned this way, and that plan goes back 100 years, and that's why I collect all the books that explain that
yeah.
plan. But
So
that's a key part of it, definitely.
some might say the plan goes back, you know,
Yeah.
thousands of years,
My
but
books go back 100 years, but yeah, the plan definitely goes back further than that.
so what would you say? We've got like 5 minutes left, so another big
Mhm.
question, right? So what would you say is the overarching goals of the people that run the show, the people that appoint the puppet politicians?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's just maintaining their control and wealth and influence and power. I think that's always been the game. I think as far back as you can go, what we're allowed to know about history, what we've been told about history, it's always it's always a tiny group exploiting the rest of people, everybody else. And then there seemed to be this glimmer of hope when America went over and set up, and there was on horrific circumstances to the people already living there. But
yeah,
the way that they kind of separated, said, we're not paying that tax. We don't want to be, we'll go
yeah,
over here, we'll do our thing, we'll write up our own constitution, and we'll
yeah,
we'll we'll kind of be free of that yoke. It had an ethos behind it, which was built on freedom and individual
yeah,
rights that I think needs to be protected or like brought back and spread. And that's
yeah.
what they want to get rid of. It's like, no, we can't
Well,
have
I
the
think
little
I think
people
to be
down there
honest,
saying
Nick,
that.
that they have got rid of it, and the question is whether we can try to educate people and get them to value their own freedom,
Hmm.
so that we can go back to a society where there are private property rights. People understand why it's important that there's free speech, so you can, have meaningful debates and get to the truth. But
Yeah, and it's
but
like all these people who go on about minorities and diversity and this kind of thing. Well, the smallest minority is one person, right? So
yeah,
if you're not talking about the rights of the individual, the God-given rights
yeah,
of each
yeah, yeah,
individual person, then you're
yeah.
talking BS, and you need to
We'll
make your
we'll we'll
minority smaller.
we'll have to see how this interview podcast goes. But that could be something to do another one on a half an hour on what we believe to be inalienable human rights that should be
Mm.
safeguarded from politicians and the government at all costs.
Yeah, I'd be
Almost like a
very much enjoy that.
yeah, yeah. So what one last thing then. So what about the issue of um, good and evil and depopulation? Like, would you say that my belief is that I think for centuries they've been trying to pursue depopulation, obviously
Hmm.
through war, maybe famine at some points in time in some countries.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And what happened in March 2020 was just another. I suppose it was. They've been trying to do it for quite a long time, haven't they? Like reduce the number of units of carbon pollution, let's say, the
Yeah, like you are
organic
the
unit.
carbon that they want to reduce. That's
Yeah,
the thing,
that's the
isn't
one.
it?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one.
but yeah, and I think now that they've got to a point with the technology, so much can be automated, so much can
Yeah,
just be passed off to AI and robots and algorithms. They've kind of gone, now that we've got this, we kind of don't need so many people running around there to exploit and get things done for us. So I think that could be an angle on it as well. And it's incredible the insidious ways that they attack people to get to have that outcome we were talking about, not having children, not having a stake in the future, not
yeah.
taking on responsibility, not planning for anything beyond the next payday. So it's incredibly
And to
insidious.
be
But
honest, it must that sort of night. Yeah, when I was a teacher, I really did notice this at the schools. They just push nihilism. Life is hopeless. Life is meaningless.
mm,
All you have to do is get a good job, get married, buy a nice house, and then that's it. There's nothing really more to life than that. But
yeah,
just go. What I am interested in as well, Nick, is just your experiences out and about in because you live in Burnley, don't you, or near
yeah,
Burnley?
yeah.
So, in your interactions with people, would you say that are you coming across people who are beginning to question what happened in 2020, 2021, and this
Not so
idea of
much.
not so much?
Yeah, but I'm quite an introvert. I spend a lot of time where I work from home. Me and my wife and I work from home, and I mainly just go out and see family. And what I'm kind of feeling is that there's people are more like head in the sand, don't talk about that, and just carry on, getting our takeaways, watching our Netflix, flicking on our smartphones. But I'm sure there are movements. When I was in Bristol, I found a lot more people there who were aware, and there was a Freedom Cells group there, and I found a lot more in person. And I happened to be working in a big team, and there was a bunch of people in that team who were
Wow.
questioning, asking a lot of questions, like I was. But
Yeah.
nowadays, it feels like people are just desperately trying to pretend everything's normal. That's how it feels
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. And what
You
about,
know,
did you go to school, in Burnley?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
actually, I was down the road, but yeah, I was here in this area until about 18 years old.
So are you still in touch with any of your old schoolmates?
Not really. One, he's doing pretty well. He's had a baby and he's settled down and got a house, so he's in a good situation. A lot
Yeah,
of the people I met at university have done pretty well. They've, settled down,
yeah,
started families, and so it is good in that sense. I do know people, but because I've moved around a lot, I lost
yeah.
contact with a lot of people and got
Okay.
new
Because
bunches of friends
I
every
was,
time.
obviously I was trying to angle it, if you had any information from those sources. But one thing that I'll flesh out an idea. You can say whether you agree or not. But
Yeah,
I think a key element to their strategy working in the way that it did in 2020 was, let's call it furlong, yeah, because even that
right.
F word will, where people got 80% of their pay for doing nothing, and then there
Yeah.
was also working from home.
Mm,
For me, my feeling about that was that that was a colossal bribe, and people went along with, the shut ups, stay
mm,
at home and whatever, because it benefited them at the time. I used to live in Guildford, and there was a lot of people there who would commute up to the city, like 2 hours there, 2 hours back. So, like working from home for them was, it would have massively improved their quality of life. So it was almost
yeah.
like a bribe. But
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. Another question, right? Do you think people have understood that all the money that was printed back then has got any link to the current cost of living crisis? Do you think people are able to make that connection a little bit?
I don't know. That's a good question. Certainly, people in my immediate circles, some do. Others think, oh, war, it's just the Russians, it's Putin's fault.
Yeah,
I don't think a lot of people understand money and where it comes from and the banking
no,
system and the Bank of England and the printing of it and that inflation is caused by printing money and the money had to be
yeah,
printed to bribe everyone to stay at home and not kick up too
yeah,
much of a fuss about what was being done to
yeah,
them and the economy at the time. And did you know? Did you also notice as well that were you in England for that first round of L
yeah. It
downs?
was,
Because the
yeah,
weather was unbelievable that
yeah.
summer.
I
That was the
remember that.
best summer I think I've
Yeah.
ever I can remember in at all in England. It was just what are the odds? What are and I know there wasn't as much traffic and planes and things, but still,
It was
I was
it was
like,
it was it was April, May, and June, wasn't it?
yeah,
And then
just
and then
blinding,
when
glorious sunshine.
it was, but the back end of that summer was, I thought, was sort of normal. But for those first 3 months, when people, they closed the economy down, yeah, you're absolutely right. There wasn't a cloud in the sky.
Yeah,
Um,
bizarre, very strange timing. I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
oh, of course, it's just a coincidence, yeah. Um, but I just wonder now if they were to come along with another, tiny little thing that you can't see that's deadly to people. Would people go along with it as readily as they did before?
I
My
hope not.
feeling is, yeah, that's right. I suppose it's difficult to know for certain, but my feeling is that there are many people who probably know that they were sold a put, but their egos are so big they just can't admit, not even to themselves, maybe, let alone other people, that they were wrong and the
Yeah.
so-called conspiracy theorists were right. But
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's so hard to admit I was wrong. Three of the hardest words it seems for people to say.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I was wrong. People hate
yeah,
saying these five words. And I think more people need to just man up and accept that it's okay to be wrong, but
yeah.
don't carry
I
on
think,
being wrong and persist with that folly.
yeah, I would say as a teacher, that would be, if I was, well, my solution is just decentralization anyway. But I think a good school worth its salt, or a good teacher worth his or her salt, that's something that they should teach young people, that it's okay to be wrong. And when you
Yeah.
are wrong, admit you're wrong, and then learn the mistake.
Yeah.
Don't make the same mistakes again. Learn from it. There's nothing wrong in making mistakes. That's
Yeah.
something that I really strongly believe.
The ego was such a powerful mechanism for their success the first time around, though, because the amount of virtue sick, some people enjoyed it. They had this
Yeah,
really weird response where they were kind of like happy and gloating about this thing, and there was
yeah,
a sick pleasure, and I couldn't quite
yeah.
put my finger on why anybody would respond apart from being out sit in your garden and chill out. But there were some people who were kind of like, "Ha,
Well,
See,
Here,
really
here,
glad about it.
here you go, Nick. I think what it is, it goes back to sort of the nihilism again. If you strip
Mm,
away meaning from life, and all life is going to work and moving swiftly to your next shopping destination, then this I call it the people's pantomime came
mm.
along. You know, the biggest live action role play, and people found it exciting because it broke the monotony of their lives.
Yeah, that's a great point. It was exciting. It was like something to do, wasn't it? It was something to get involved in. It was a chance to be a hero without actually
Well,
doing anything.
not for us. I don't think. I don't
No,
think.
but for a lot of people, they were like, "Oh, great, we can unite, we can join this fight." It was like wartime. That a lot of the
Yeah,
language and the rhetoric around it
yeah.
was
Of
wartime. It
course
was
it
join the
was.
fight and do your bit
Yeah,
and band
of
together
course it
and
was.
hit your pots and pans and cheer for the heroes. And it was harnessing this kind of pulling people out of the monotony, giving them a thing to focus on, and telling them that they were really great, giving them a pat on the head, giving them some free money, giving them a extra like a mini holiday, some nice weather.
Yeah,
Very very powerful stuff, and it took a lot to say no to that. And I definitely was just so confounded and confused for a large portion of the
yeah.
probably the first year or two
We'll,
because I was just head down learning mode.
we'll maybe need to talk about that again because it's going to cut off, Nick. So
Okay,
thanks very much for coming on, and
my pleasure.
let's hope it records, and I'll post it up straight away. But it's absolutely brilliant chatting to you. So
Thank you for the invitation. I
enjoy.
appreciate it.
Yeah, you're more than welcome, Nick. And yeah, I'll put the links up to your YouTube site, and I'll try and find some of the other links to some of the other people that you talked about as well. So cheers,
Awesome.
Nick. So God bless.
All right, God bless.
Cheers.